So thank you everyone for joining us today. We are happy to be your Barbie and Oppenheimer pre-show. Um, and a special thank you to you, Thomas, for joining us to discuss such an important subject, the ever-changing nature of affiliate fraud. To kick things off, I will throw some easy questions your way to start out. So first off, I'll let you just kind of introduce yourself and give a little background on what it is that Count does.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Thomas Reardon. I am a partner business manager here at Count. I'll dive into that, what I do specifically a little later on. But in short, what Count is a fraud provider for card not present transactions. And we use our Identity Trust Global Network, which is a fancy way of saying all the data that we've been collecting since our inception in 2007, to provide a risk score on a transaction that a merchant can use in decisioning processing if they want to accept or decline the order. And so the goal is to pretty much give the merchant confidence accepting or declining transactions based on the data we have and the risk that we score it at.
Awesome. And so now I'll let you kind of give a background on what it is exactly your role is.
Yeah, so the fun thing about being a partner business manager is that every partner is going to be different and have a lot of needs and desires that I have to fulfill. So every day is totally different, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is manage the overall health of the partnership and provide support in ways that we can highlight the unique use case that us and the partner are solving, or work together to spread awareness of the value of a fraud provider and what the positive impact they could have on their businesses.
So never a boring day.
No,
That's good. You never want to be in a role where you're like, I do the same thing every day. It's nice to mix it up. And what led you to the industry?
Yeah, so prior to this, I was actually working in the payroll industry, so very familiar with payments. Obviously, COVID hit and completely shifted the buying behavior, and that really caught my attention. So I decided to explore other opportunities within that vicinity and found out, hey, I'm still working in the payments area, but just from a different avenue this time.
Yeah, that's all. Do you feel like that gave you a good kind of background when you started with Count, or was it just a total different ballgame?
It was relatively a different ballgame in a sense because we focus on card not present transactions. So with payroll, a lot of times it's going to be a restaurant where you're swiping your card or tapping it, whatever it may be. So it was a shift in those regards, but the processes and a lot of the merchants that we work with and clients and their problems were very similar to them.
Awesome. So now that we know a little bit about you and what Count does, I'll go into a little bit more in-depth questions. What or why is fraud within the affiliate world such a big concern at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's three main reasons that fraud has now become such a topic of concern. And it really always boils down to the landscape has been changing drastically, meaning the impact of being hit by fraud is going to be a lot more impactful and hard to come back from. You take COVID, for example, and that created a buying behavior shift where card not present transactions skyrocketed, and that continues to increase year over year. And then that means that the payouts for the successful fraud rings are going to be more lucrative than ever just because there's simply more traffic. And what we're more recently seeing is now the introduction of AI bots into fraud schemes, which is eliminating the manual lift that people have to do, like creating logins, creating the password, so on and so forth, and expediting the fraud, the rate of fraud that's being committed at, making the entry to the industry a lot easier as well. And then the third component to this is that there's the overhang of the recession, which puts enough pressure on people to pick up a side hustle. And a lot of times that side hustle, with how easy it is to get into the industry of fraud with the AI bots, that becomes their job, side hustle of choice, you could say.
Side hustle fraud.
Yeah, side hustle fraud, exactly. And so combining all three of these factors together is why I think it's such more talked about and creates a lot more risks for affiliates. If you want to put a number on it, research is projecting the affiliate fraud industry alone to be around 120 billion.
Wow, it's a big number. And I mean, you mentioned AI. It's such a big topic in general right now, kind of on all levels of safety. With AI still being so new, though, do you think that there's a chance that this issue becomes even bigger? Or do you think it's kind of like already hit like the issues you're going to run into?
Yeah, I think we're almost just hitting the beginning, right? I think with a great example is Chat GPT. With what they're doing, right? I think previously there was detections to spot out emails that would look fake. Because if I'm someone taking the time to write out 20 different emails to create fake accounts to direct traffic to someone's site, I'm going to create an email that says 11A76 and at gmail.com. But get ChatGPT to create that email for you, it's going to look like a legit email. So the tactics that people had previously to spot fake emails and get those bad actors away are now becoming obsolete.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like even soon, we just got used to being able to like see on our iPhones that says scam risk or spam risk. And it's probably going to be now we're just going to get real names coming up on our phones through AI. So same kind of thing. It's like, how do you combat that and prepare for it when it's kind of like ever changing? But yeah. I mean, what makes Count different from other companies in preventing fraud?
Yeah. I think the main thing I want to highlight about what makes Count different and separates us from a lot of the competitors out there is that we actually started as a merchant. Our sister company called ClickBank is an e-commerce platform and affiliate marketplace that was founded in the early 90s by a man named Dr. Tim Barber. Shortly after creating this marketplace, he was experiencing a bit of fraud. Super intelligent man, so he ended up coding a line of JavaScript called the Device Data Collector, also known as the DDC. And that allowed him to confirm and fingerprint devices and confirm online identities of who people actually were. And that patent was actually the beginning of Count. So later on, it became a standalone product, and that's how Count was founded. And I bring this all up to say basically that as we started as an affiliate marketplace, that we understand the issues and the struggles that they face on a day-to-day basis. So we invest in our product with their issues in mind. So I think we get a different viewpoint than a lot of other fraud providers out there. And then secondly, we were acquired by Equifax February of 2021, which was huge for us because when you think of Count, we focus on the digital identity of who someone is, right? So how many devices do we associate with them? How many cards do we associate with them? Their IP address, anything like that, the time zone. We jump over to Equifax where they're focused on the physical identity of who someone is, right? So their marital status, salary, where they live, how many kids. When you combine all the data of the digital world with the physical identity, you get a more full, complete picture of who someone is and therefore a much stronger solution.
Yeah, it gives you like the full package on top of, like you mentioned, like having that background in the affiliate world to kind of really be able to dive deeper into it is a huge perk. That's something very unique in the industry for sure. And I know that me and you spoke previously, and in one of our conversations, you said that it wasn't uncommon for businesses to come to you without any full knowledge of kind of like the impact that fraud was actually having on their company. So how does Count help these merchants when they come to you and with their fraud, like figuring out what their fraud problem actually is and then using the data on Count's network? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with new businesses, but even existing businesses, I think they look at chargebacks and dealing with that as just a cost of doing business when it doesn't have to be. So if a business doesn't have a provider like Count, they're not going to be able to have consistent insights into the metrics on why transactions are being declined or where their chargebacks are stemming from. And that's going to be the information you want to know that's going to lead you to understanding the source of your issue at hand. And so what Count does is we enable our merchants to see the rules that were triggered and the reason codes with them, helping the merchant understand their fraud. And then therefore they can create rules around that to increase their approval orders or decrease their chargeback rate, but make it so it's customizable to each business.
That's great. So it's not like here's our network, figure it out on your own, figure out your problems. It's very much you guys are like hands-on in the way of like guiding them to like setting certain things up so that it works for them. That's really awesome. Yeah. I know that you did mention chargebacks, and I have to say, I know not everyone in the industry is familiar with exactly what a chargeback is. Do you mind kind of explaining that and giving a brief example of how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So a chargeback is when someone calls their card network or bank to dispute a charge they either do not recognize or feel was unjustly added. And then in order to keep good standing with the customer, the bank or card network is going to reimburse that caller for the value of the good or service, right? No questions asked. This process becomes fraudulent when someone knowingly participates in it with the idea and the intent of keeping the product as well. The same situation can happen inadvertently as well, and that's known as friendly fraud, which is where maybe someone calls and didn't recognize a purchase, but it was their son who made an Xbox account or they made an extra purchase, right? And they just didn't know what was going on. Or other cases, it'd be like a yearly membership, right? That you totally forgot about. And you're like, what the heck is this $120 charge? I don't recall for this. You call in like, oh yeah, it was the gym membership that I stopped going to 6 months after I joined.
We've
So
all been there.
yeah, right.
Those New Year's resolutions will get you.
Yeah, I know.
No, that
And
makes sense. I mean, you hear those stories of like the kids purchasing things on the iPads or like through the games that they're playing, and like mom and dad have absolutely no idea what's going on. So that makes absolute sense. And how would that be handled? Like, is it a problem to the company? Like, what's the protocol when it comes to that?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is the unfortunate part about the process is that the merchant at hand ends up being responsible for reimbursing the bank, and then they have to take the original loss of that product or good and the value of that as well. So they're out double the amount of money right there. Yeah, so it can be pretty painful, especially when you get a bunch of them where people are directing a bunch of traffic and it all turns into chargebacks. They all hit like later on. It can be a big problem that happens very quickly.
And can there be like kind of a delay in that too? Like you said, like there can be just like all the chargebacks hit at once. Like, is there a delay in them, or is it pretty immediately when that happens?
Yeah, people are able to file a chargeback about 3 months after they make the purchase of something. So, the purchase and transaction could have gone through and a month passes, 2 months pass, and all of a sudden they get a chargeback and it hits. That's a lot of time that they think everything's fine and dandy, and then later on find out they're getting hit with a bunch of chargebacks 3 months later.
Yeah, which will hurt the bank if you're not ready for it. And what are some of the most common tactics used within the affiliate fraud industry? Kind of like what the people and businesses need to look out for when it comes to affiliate fraud.
Yeah, actually a couple more things I wanted to talk about, at least with the chargeback process and whatnot.
Go for it.
Merchant being responsible for reimbursing both of them, they do have the option to fight that chargeback, right? Okay. And that becomes a long and tedious process because each card network has different rules. And then they also give you like an allotted time that you have to respond in. And if you don't respond in that allotted time, they take that as admission of guilt. And therefore the case is closed and you can't fight the chargeback. So all this to say is that it's a long, lengthy, and confusing process to do that. But with our AI and machine learning models, Count is able to prevent these purchases pre-auth, so they don't end up as chargebacks in the first place. And in the case where it's friendly fraud, right, and the information does line up, but they just don't recognize it, we can actually provide the data collected at the time of the purchase. So it would be like the device ID, the IP address, the cart information, the card that was used, the time of day, the date, right? And so we provide that information to those merchants to fight back the chargebacks.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that could be someone's make or break for the year, month, quarter, whatever it may be. Because I mean, how else are you going to battle it? And if you don't have all that information, it's like, okay, well, they just get their money back and you're charged twice. Yeah. Which would be a big bummer because I'm sure, like, I mean, if you don't know the statistic, don't worry about answering it. But like, how often does that happen for companies that they get chargebacks or friendly chargebacks, whichever you want to call it?
It varies from merchant to merchant, depending if they're high risk or not, or high order value on items like a Rolex or something. If you get a chargeback for that, you're getting 10 to 15 grand potentially back. But I think the biggest thing to note here is that many people, when they call and they file to make the chargeback, we provide that information to the other person on the phone when they're calling. So therefore they'll say, hey, like, I don't recognize this charge. And they're like, well, really, we see that it was from this address to this shipping address at this time. And about 40 to 50% of the time, the callback chargeback ends right then and there because they just hang up the phone knowing that they're probably going to lose.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything else you want to give us information on with the chargebacks?
Lastly, like, as I mentioned, the process is confusing. We do have the evidence to help you fight it, but with it being long and confusing, if you don't want to fight it, Count also does have representment services where they'll go and fight the chargeback for the merchant on their behalf.
Yeah, that's such a unique opportunity too, and some that people probably wouldn't even think about, like when looking for someone to help with their fraud, is as far as like network wise, that, oh, they're actually going to fight it post it actually occurring, not just prevent it. That's really neat that you guys do that for sure.
Yeah.
And so kind of like moving on a little bit, what tactics do you see occur mostly within the affiliate fraud that people need to be aware of to then prevent?
Yeah, and this is where I think like the shift, the changing nature of affiliate fraud really hits home right now, is because we're seeing less and less of like coupon fraud or cookie stuffing and more of these AI bots that are creating fake accounts with stolen information. And then they send all that traffic. And I'm talking like they're creating thousands of accounts or logins and passwords in a matter of minutes and sending it all to someone's affiliate space, just generating lead flow or bonuses, whatever the incentive is. That's primarily where I think it's changing, where the shift is. But that's the primary tactic that we're seeing these days. And as I mentioned before, using things like ChatGPT to just be so advanced, where previous technology they're using to spot these fake emails and fraudsters is becoming obsolete.
Yeah, it brings it back to the AI chat before is, it makes it so much easier for someone to do fraud. And I mean, I even heard something on the news the other day that it's so smart that it can literally mimic like a famous artist and create a song using their voice. So it's like, what's next?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I totally get how easy it could be for, multiple accounts in minutes. It definitely makes it more prominent for people to really need fraud protection and a system that's going to help them do so, for sure. Yeah. Looking a little bit bigger picture, can you give us like 3 types of fraud that you and your team kind of come across mostly outside of like the AI world right now?
Yeah, so 3 biggest types is going to be first party fraud, which is when someone is basically using their own information to commit fraud. As we said, committing a chargeback knowingly is fraudulent, or doing coupon abuse or something like that. As I said, second up would be creation of the fake accounts. And then more recently, this jumped probably about close to 30%, 20 to 30% last month, is account takeover fraud, where obviously the fraudster takes over your account, drains them of the loyalty points, steals all their card information on that, but then goes and directs traffic to their affiliate space as well and makes purchases with that stuff. So
what happens with that? So like typically like with chargebacks and other things you said, you guys can kind of like come back and battle it afterwards. With something where they actually take over the entire account, is there anything you can do after, or is it kind of like a lost cause of they have everything at that point, whether it's loyalty points, actual credit card fraud, your bank account, whatever it may be?
Yeah, so the thing is, I mean, the company maybe might reimburse you for it, right, out of good faith. But the key to this is to be preventative and not reactive. And so with account services, and especially our account takeover, it's called account control product. If someone is going through a bunch of different profiles and creating these different accounts, they're going to be doing it at one location more often than not, right? So we're going to see, hey, these credit cards that he's using, they typically have profiles with people in Alabama, New York, somewhere else, right? And they're typically associated with this IP address and this time zone. Now all of a sudden they're in Washington, and we're seeing this one location pop up with different card informations, popping up with different profiles. That to us, we know right away is fraudulent, and we're going to prevent those transactions from even going through in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense because it's instead of having to backtrack. I mean, it's kind of like when your bank calls and cancels you because you're in the Bahamas and you've never been to the Bahamas before. Yeah. And it's like, you didn't tell us and you've never been there before. So prevention, which is great. And you appreciate it after the fact, of course. But when it is you, you're like, wait, I need that. But it makes complete sense. Because I mean, like you said, if you can't get that back, or like hopefully the company will give you your money back out of good faith, but that's not always the case. So having those prevention put into place is definitely like the way to go for sure. And how much would you say that businesses like lose due to these uncertain operations?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, research has shown that 2024, the affiliate fraud space alone is going to be around 120 billion, which means about 29%, if you do the math, of all digital advertising expenditures are actually going to fraud and not the business.
Wow. I knew it was a lot, but 29% just really like paints the picture for you to kind of show like that's how much is going down for sure. And, we've mentioned a few different things that, you guys are able to do in preventing these, but what kind of results can like positive or expecting like hope wise for people that decide to put more of their investment into fraud prevention? Like what can their first high hopes be for that? Because I know a lot of people probably think like, oh, like it's a lot of money to put into that, or like I don't want to spend money on it, but they don't realize how much they're losing.
Yeah.
Not doing it.
You have a high chargeback order, we're definitely the solution, or a high chargeback rate, definitely the solution for you. But a guarantee is going to be the reduction in chargebacks. As stated earlier, when you have someone that's creating these fake accounts and making these purchases, they're typically doing it one location with one IP address. And that is a huge red flag for us here at Account. So we're going to prevent them upstream rather than be, again, reactive and then fighting a chargeback. That's no fun. Let's just take the data that we have on all these profiles and make some sense of it and realize, hey, this guy is up to something, and therefore just reject it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, you got to be able to have that positive outlook and like bigger picture when you're working on deciding on whether or not to invest in fraud prevention. Because if you're not looking at the bigger picture, you're just looking at only things you can see, it's going to be hard to like know how much you're going to benefit from it for sure. Absolutely. And, especially in the affiliate world where people are paying out these affiliates right and left for everything they're doing for them, they want to make sure that that money that they're paying is going to people that are actually bringing them correct business and not causing kind of losing that money for no reason. And it's huge to have that for sure. Especially now that like affiliates are such a big part of any business and doing their marketing, it's getting bigger and bigger and changing by day. So it's important to have these in place. Now, for everyone watching or going to watch down the road, what is the one key takeaway you would want everyone to like leave today knowing or understanding?
Yeah. I'm going to backtrack one more time because
go for it. This is giving you the floor.
As you said, right, like you don't want to be paying out money to those high risk affiliates. And with the information we have, right, you're going to have different mids for each one of your affiliates. So you're going to be able to track where your chargebacks are coming from. So you're going to be saying, hey, these ones had 2, 3, 4, this one had 10. Right then and there, you're going to know that that's your high risk affiliate, and you can then make business decisions accordingly on if it's worth the relationship or not at that point, and then also identify your best performing affiliates as well.
Absolutely, because I mean, you can have a sense of like something's off all you want, but it gives you like, what's the saying? Like the proof is in the pudding. Of like, it gives you straight up evidence that like this is happening, like we aren't going to pay you anymore, or until you prove to us that this isn't occurring, like you're off our payroll or whatever they consider it at their company. And same thing like you mentioned with the higher affiliates that are bringing in more, it gives them that credit and shows like, okay, not only are they bringing it in, but it's quality. And that's super important to companies too, because, I've met with a lot of companies that have said, it's not about quantity to us, it's about the quality. And, if they bring us something that they can get like $10 product, whatever it may be, like say it's Amazon and like they get a $10 product and then there's someone that's constantly selling the $1,000 product, like they'd rather pay their time to affiliates that are bringing in not only the quality leads, but the higher paying product. So being able to see that and know that it's going through, more than likely, like, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but my thoughts are people that are doing like the fraud in the affiliate world are probably on the smaller ticket items that test the waters of what they're getting through. And then eventually, if it's working for them, get up to the bigger ticket items. So having you guys to see all that is huge so that nobody wastes their time or money where it doesn't need to be. Absolutely. Yes. Is there anything else on that kind of topic that people should know?
No, I think that's, the only other thing is that I think many people are scared when they add layers of defense in a way to phrase it, that they're going to decrease their approval rates. But more often than not, we see a decrease in the chargebacks and an uptick actually in their approvals when they jump on account.
How quickly do you typically see that change when people join?
Because we use two types of machine learning, unsupervised and supervised, you're going to have an immediate effect, but then we're going to probably start peaking at around 2 to 3 months.
So pretty quickly, which is nice, especially if people are experiencing it to higher ends, to be able to know like, okay, like I'm making the investment and it's gonna show right away for sure. Okay, so I'll let you give like the one biggest piece of your advice that you want to give to everyone who's ever going to watch this. What do they need to know about fraud, and what do they need to do to implement it?
Yeah. So I think the one key takeaway is that what you're saying, basically.
Yeah. Your big takeaway from everything you've mentioned today.
The takeaway here is just, I think, the knowledge, and I kind of mentioned it, like, I think in one of the rapid fire questions as well, but those three factors that are changing the fraud world, right? The stakes are higher now, right? You can get hit by a bot, AI, undetected, and it completely just wipes you out. It can be super competitive too. As we said, with the overhang of the recession, more people are apt to get involved. It's easier to get involved, and it can hit you a lot quicker and a lot faster. All of these things make affiliates targets for fraud, right? That's where they know they can make some money, and it's putting you more at risk. And then you can also get hit a lot harder. So being prepared and at least having some type of fraud strategy is crucial, and just be aware of that's how our industry is changing and where it's heading.
Prepare. Be ahead of the game for sure. And, is there anything new coming down the line for Count that you can talk about, or that you guys are excited about, that's happened in the last 6 months?
Yeah, actually, super excited about Visa's compelling evidence 3.0. It's going to be a new way for merchants to fight disputes that are illegitimate. So those people that are saying, hey, I never made this charge back, but they actually did. And in short, if a merchant can provide previous records of transactions from the same user with the same information, so you got like a subscription, right? And you get it every single month, and all saying this wasn't valid, we can provide that information. And if you can provide that to the card networks, you're going to win the chargeback. Essentially, the merchant is going to win the chargeback and therefore be reimbursed for the product or good and not have to pay it out.
So they're basically making it much more impossible for people to get away with the fraud, as long as there's that evidence, which is nice.
Yeah, and so we have that evidence, as well as the people, like we said before, we acquired Mitigator earlier this year that will do the representment services.
That is incredible. And definitely something that everyone should know. Like, if you don't have the proof, you're not going to be able to fight it. So Count will help you get the proof. Thank you so much, Thomas, for all of your insights today. If any of our future viewers want to reach out to you directly, or anyone on your team with any questions or concerns, or to get signed up, where's the best place for them to reach you at?
Yeah, if they want to, I can drop my information into the chat if they want to.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys want to reach out to him, that will be great. We'll also be sharing the recording of this video down the road. So feel free to save it, watch it over again, share it with your friends. But we hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and thank you for your patience again in the beginning. Thank you, Thomas. Everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you, Remy. Enjoy your
Bye,
weekend.
guys. Thanks.